When I do fast trails on my mountain bike, I strap my Insta360 X3 to my chest and get awesome action shots like this. But if you just used what came straight out of the camera, you wouldn't get anything like this. What you'd see would be slow, bland, and bumpy. So I'm going to show you how I edit my Insta360 POV mountain biking footage to look just like this. Let's get right into it. There are 4 steps that I've broken this down into. The first thing that I adjust in post-production on my footage is field of view, or FOV. Generally, the wider your field of view, the better your POV action footage looks, and there are a few reasons for this. So firstly, field of view refers to the horizontal angle in degrees, measured left to right, that's being squeezed into your rectangular frame. So a smaller field of view would be a more narrow shot, and a wider field of view would get more of the landscape and more of the frame into the shot. The cool thing about a dual lens 360 camera like this Insta360 X3 that I use is that it's filming in a sphere around you at all times. So in post-production, you just need to sort of arbitrarily select the rectangular frame from the surface of that sphere. The reason that I think a higher field of view or more degrees squeezed into that rectangular frame makes for a better POV shot is quite simple. Imagine you're driving in a car at 100 kilometers an hour. Looking forward out of the car and into the distance, the next hill or car or object up ahead takes a while to reach you after it appears, a good few seconds. You see it and it sort of approaches, and then it's gone. But if you look directly out to the side of the car and try to focus on objects like signs, buildings, and road markings, you'll find that they're just flying by and you can barely lock your focus onto them at all. Your sensation of speed is far higher when you're looking to the side at passing objects than it is when you're looking out to the front at approaching ones. So back to filming, a higher field of view or a higher horizontal angle means you're including more stuff to the side of the camera into that frame, and the faster the resulting scene feels. Basically, we want to try and make it feel as fast as it did when we were actually riding that trail. And finally, I use this feature called de-warp, and sometimes in the Insta360 environment, it's also called no distortion. And that applies some sort of magic reverse lens distortion, which flattens out the horizon and makes all straight edges straight again, as they were previously bent by the wide angle nature of the lens. Very quickly, if you're finding this content useful or interesting or both, please consider subscribing and hitting that bell icon to be notified of new videos. And that brings me to a very important stage in the post-production process of 360 footage: keyframing. Insta360 has continued to delight me over the years by continuing to improve their hardware and software post-purchase. Since I got my X3 in February 2023, a number of firmware and software updates have enabled users to make better and better footage. For example, motion blur, overlaying training metrics from your watch or bike computer, a project mode in the desktop app, which has been quite good, among other things. So for some types of footage, like my trail running videos, I use Insta360's brilliant object tracking feature to center myself in the frame while I'm running. Alas, there is no such feature for POV mountain biking or cycling. But what that means for post-production of your cycling POV footage is that you have to go through the entire clip and use keyframing to set the position of the frame every time there's any minor or significant movement. So a shortcut that I've found here is that I've used my Logitech MX Master 3S and I've mapped one of these external function buttons down here to the Command K keyboard shortcut, so that while I'm running through the footage and using the mouse to position the frame on screen, bang, I don't have to alternate between the keyboard and mouse. The next step to creating the look of high-speed motion is what's called motion blur. Technically, what motion blur is on a mechanical camera when you decrease the shutter speed, leaving the sensor open for longer so that it can capture more movement. That additional movement, or that longer period over which your still frame is taken, is captured as a sort of blurred image. And when a video is composed of lots of still frames like that, the result is that buttery smooth feeling of motion blur. Of course, decreasing the shutter speed or leaving the shutter open for longer has the effect of letting more light shine onto the sensor, which has the tendency to overexpose your footage when it gets burnt out in that bright sort of white way. So one way that motion blur is often effected in cameras is to use what's called an ND filter, or a neutral density filter, which has the effect of reducing the amount of light that gets through the lens and therefore that falls onto the sensor. And that allows you to decrease your shutter speed and you get a normally exposed image, but you get that blurry feature. Now, of course, none of this is actually possible with the Insta360 X3, but what they've done in one of their many updates is included a fake motion blur effect in the post-production process, and it really works well. So once I've got my footage into the Insta360 desktop studio app, I turn on that motion ND feature here and toggle the values down a little. I think they default to 80 and 80, but I like the effect at about a 35 and 35 or 40 and 40. Unreal. Then when you export, you get this beautiful motion blur effect. I would imagine that they've got some sort of ML algorithm that's looking for sort of blurred or streaked elements of the frame to determine what's in motion and what's not, and then accentuating that. I also use this with running footage on both trail and on the road, and it gives it a very cool look. The last step in this workflow is to include or add back the appropriate sound or audio. The best POV shot with all of the tweaks and effects that I've talked about before is going to be crap if it's silent. Sound is super important. It's that final dimension that the viewer needs to really feel like they were there when you were shooting your footage.
Oh my goodness, are you kidding me?
Admittedly, I don't do this particularly well. I usually just include the in-camera audio that was recording when I did the mountain bike run or while I was running on the trails. And that sort of leaves a muffled wind noise, which is pretty good for creating that speedy feel, but I do think that there are probably better ways to do it. Sometimes I also narrate or do live voiceovers on my downhill runs, which is also quite a cool effect.
Whoa, it is tight. Oh!
I mean, you could ride right off here. So with those 4 processes, field of view, keyframing, motion blur, and sound, you should be pumping out much better POV action sports footage, especially from a camera like a dual lens Insta360 X3 or X4. Let me know in the comments below what other action sports filmmaking type techniques you'd like to see. If you found this video interesting or useful or both, please consider subscribing, and I'll see you on the trails.